Howdy y'all, I am Ice Gold, and while you're watching this, I am actually in the process of getting oriented at my university, and I'm real excited. It's like a big step forward in my life, and I'm really happy to be here, but figure I might as well. It's like, even though this is a day where I'm sort of celebrating being able to take a step forward, I wanted to reminisce and look back on some of my old videos, like old videos from 2020, back when, and I always say this, back when the game was good. And there are a lot of things that made the game good back then. What you're watching right now is some quick match footage from my myth back when I was doing that, and it was a very fun time. I don't have like a script or anything for this, but I just wanted to talk about it. So, the good old days, right? Old school PvP. That's sort of what we're talking about. And when I talk about old school PvP, it's sort of like back. It was lawless back in those days. If that makes sense. And I really miss those days. That was the most fun I think I've ever had on this game, and I loved it. I loved that era of PvP so much. And this week I have not really had the greatest of times doing PvP, and I mean, you saw yesterday, you'll see tomorrow. PvP is very draining to play right now because there's just a lot that is not fun. And way back in the day, you know, we had a lot of things that made the game really fun. And sure, there was some unbalanced stuff. And to give you the truth, I'll say this right now, I think that PvP was at like its closest to being completely balanced, as in every school could beat every school in the fall of 2020. And I played back then. I could say right now that every school had a chance, because it's like a storm could pressure a Scion, and you really had to stay on top of Blades. It was like that was Storm's whole thing back then. You had to really, stay on it, and like have Aegis Blades and whatnot. And it's like you had to pack counters to stuff back then too, but it wasn't like it is now, where there's just so much nonsense that you need to pull for, and you know how it is, or maybe you don't, but those of us who played back in 2020 will know how it is. And I guess I should talk about why I liked that era of PvP so much. It was fun, mainly because you could, there was a lot more that you could do, because now, there's, like, I'm pretty sure Ratbeard himself has said 20% of all spells in the entire game are banned from PvP. And way back then, it was nowhere near this number. It might have been 2%, like at best. And for a good reason. I mean, there wasn't as much that was considered to be really broken. Spells were just sort of what they were. And before the summer update of 2020, it was not as great because there was still a lot of unbalanced stuff and that type of deal. But the spell nerfs, I didn't like them back then, but now it's like I see why they had to happen. Even back then I saw why they had to happen, because it's like there were a lot of things that were doing too much back then, and I really think that was the closest that Wiz ever got to being totally balanced. And it was when Wiz was at its most fun. I've probably said this to death, but Wiz back then, you could draw hits from side deck, as you've seen me doing throughout this video in the background footage. And being able to draw hits from side deck, that added a lot of fun to the meta, because there was not as much deck failing to happen, and it's, you could set up combos. There wasn't like PvE wasn't as prevalent, like PvE cheese strats, like where you just stack a bunch. It's like there was Vengeful Seraph back then. That was a thing, but it was it's like that was the only stacking strat that we saw. There were trap stack fires back in those days, but they were not really as prevalent. And I guess part of me wishes we could return to those days, but it's a lot at once, and I don't think that the game could transition back to that. So I mean that's just sort of where I'm coming from with that. And I do think that the game it's got a ways to go in terms of how fun it can be, but it was sort of an exhilarating feeling, you know. It's like deck RNG was also totally, it wasn't as big of a problem, you know, because it's like nowadays you have to really cycle your deck hard, and like if you want to pull the things that you need, like the counters you desperately need in order to not get one shot. But back then, it's like deck failing was not as much of a thing. There was a lot more skill to it back in 2020. And I mean, like I am just sort of an old head talking about it, but back in 2020 there was a lot more skill with deck building. You could run a smaller deck so that you could pull what you needed even better. Like I know Trap Stack Fires did that back in the day. They would just run like maybe 2-3 rows in their deck and it would work. But now you can't do that anymore because Arch Mastery, and you know, you need to dip into so many other schools to be able to counter correctly, and it's a whole thing. But back then, your main deck was reserved for utility and your side was reserved for like offensive moves and hits. And that was how we liked it. That was how we liked it for a while. And it never really occurred to me why the devs would just take that away. It's like they wanted to ban pre-enchanted treasure cards, and now I see like, oh, you know, it's that's actually understandable. It is understandable to want to ban those cards, because they did do a lot of damage. Like you've probably been seeing me doing like half of somebody's health with Shad, and that's how it was back then. And part of me is glad that the meta slowed down a bit as a result of the TC bans, but a bigger part of me is sad about how like a lot of the fun went with it, because being able to play how you wanted, being able to play fast, it's like there was a lot that people could do, and that was sort of the the allure of it. And I mean, people liked PvP back then because you could sort of just do what you wanted, and there wasn't all of this, you have to play a specific way. There's a very specific gear setup that you have to get. And I've got a video on that actually coming out on Saturday, where I go over the best gear setup for each school. And it's like back in those days, I didn't have to make a video like that. It's like there was no best, like definitively best setup. You could run 4-piece Shad, you could run, you know, less Shads, and go for Scion plays, that type of deal. Because like the Scions back then, they were different, and they were really fun to mess around with, especially the Myth Scion. It was a little broken in hindsight, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just talking. But that's the old head's dilemma. I miss what the game was back in 2020, as do many people, and there has been talk about, like, you know, maybe there could be a tournament mode where where it's like old school quote unquote PvP. And I've seen a lot of people against that, and it's like, you don't want to experience the fun and the rush of being able to, you know, play aggressively like you want to. It's like, it's I don't know, man. And there are people that are saying like old school PvP is just gonna be worse, I guess, because it's like, oh, you want -90 Ifrits, and it's like those are there were things that needed to be banned. We don't think of old school PvP as some like utopia scenario where it's like everything was perfect. It's like, no, there were definitely things that needed to be tweaked. Cards and stats especially. Like minus 90 Ifrits, they needed to go. Mantles needed to go. In the video that I'm watching as I'm recording this, the guy, I was going against a fire on my myth back then, and the video I'm watching right now as I talk just mantled me. Just put a 55 mantle on me. And do I fizzle it? Let's see here. Is it power hour? I said that a lot back then too. Is it power hour? And it was power hour, and I won because of it. It was power hour in that video, and I won because of it. So yeah, it's like making plays like that was part of the fun. And there are some people who don't want that fun, even in a tournament form. And yeah, I don't. It's like if there were some extra regulations, it's like we want old school PvP with some regulations, and I don't know if I could trust the devs to implement the like good regulations. Like I'm talking like banning the other minus 90 Ifrits, banning stuff like what's another TC that needed to be banned? I don't even know. I can't even name one. Like Icebird, I guess. It's like some of the stuff does still need to stay banned, even in like an old school tournament mode. But it's like it's not everything that needs to. And like it's not to the point where it's not even a venture worth taking. So like if that tournament style comes back in the summer, you best believe I am hopping in and I am playing it. That'll be the first video that I make once the update drops. So yeah, I've been talking for like 13 minutes. I don't really know how to really finish off the video. I'm just sort of reminiscing, looking back on good times, looking back on the best of times on this important day in my life. So yeah, thank y'all for watching. I've been Ice Gold, formerly Julo, as I was in those days, and yeah, my Discord is down in the description if you want to chat with me some more, and I'll see y'all later.